main agenda. So have we any apologies for absence? I don't think so. Nope. Okay, any members, any declarations of interest? Nope. Okay. Item number 3, which is the Scottish Fire and Rescue Services report. And I think we've got Alex McKinley, the Group Commander here. Morning, Alex.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, councillors. Thank you for inviting me along today to present the Q1 report to the Westwall Strathpeffer and Lochalsh Committee. Before I take any questions, you've all received my report and supporting documents. Before I receive any questions, can I have a second of your time? And I appreciate you've got a busy agenda, but it was just to report on a consultation, and I think it's relevant because this consultation is on one of the reporting priorities of the report, and it's a consultation that's now gone out and it will be completed on the 11th of October, and the subject is reducing unwanted fire alarm signals, which we report on. And what I would request that we have your support in sharing it, and perhaps I would like to invite you all to go onto the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service website and taking part in the survey. There's a number of options. We don't have a priority on that options, but it is a future options for how we deal with unwanted fire alarms. So I would appreciate your support and completing that survey. So now I've plugged that, councillors, I would welcome any questions on the report that I've submitted.
Okay, no problem. Councillors, have we any questions? Des?
Your microphone is still...
It's not on the report, but it's a question I want to know from the fire and rescue. So new heat sensors, what is the date that we have to, does every household have to have them in by? The heat sensor, how many do you need in every house?
Heat sensors, I take it you're referring to the new Scottish Government policy that all premises are to have smoke detection put out to the main communal areas and one in your main room. So, for example, they'll be in your corridors within 3 metres of your sleeping accommodation and one in your main area in your, for example, your living room. Also, a heat detector should be provided in your kitchen. This is not a Scottish Fire and Rescue Service requirement. We're not an enforcing authority on it because it is domestic properties. So we will not be enforcing that.
Thank you. And another one before I go is the Fire and Rescue Service. The unions were negotiating for them taking on the first responders' responsibilities. How has that panned out with the trade unions?
I think you're referring to the pay settlement for us taking on additional...
No, because we were asking about the fire service doing first responders, and we were told, I was told at a meeting that it was being negotiated with the unions.
All right. Well, the formal acceptance or the strategy hasn't been completed yet, but I can assure you that we are supporting Scottish Ambulance Service in attending a range of supportive roles in assisting vulnerable people in the community, and that every appliance is also carrying defibs, so we're able to respond to cardiac arrest if necessary. But the final agreement hasn't been ratified yet, but we are already actually doing it in remote rural communities.
Okay, thanks for that, Alex. Any other questions, Derek? Nope. Alex?
I've got maybe just got one quick question. But thanks very much for the report, Alex. Really detailed, and it's all really easy to understand. I was just looking at the station availability, and again, looking into it, you know, there are some decreasing figures, some increasing. So there's a kind of mix there. And the question I had was something that we've discussed before, but it's gone off out of my head, and I can't remember what I wrote down. But how many minutes can you be from a station when you get a call out, and I'm for retained firefighting? It's just something that somebody's asked me this question recently.
Yeah,
and I thought I had the answer to hand, but I don't. Sorry.
At the moment, the guidance is that anyone wanting to join the RDS station should be within 8 minutes of responding from their home address to the property. However, Councillor, we take a pragmatic approach. In areas that are extreme remote rural, if we're struggling to recruit, we have the authority to extend that, and I've done it in my own area to 15 minutes, because I would rather an appliance arriving a few minutes late than not at all. And by increasing it just that few minutes takes in a far larger catchment area in remote rural areas. So in answer to your question, the guidance is 8 minutes, but we are pragmatic, and in certain areas we'll certainly extend that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I've just got one. It's one question. It's regarding the station availability.
Yes, Chair.
I see Achill to Bowie is about 47, although I see in your staff changing, it looks like it's went up the way. I've been hearing rumbles from Ullapool. Let's just say that slightly moaning that they've got to cover Achill to Bowie in making areas. But what chance are we getting more people in Achill to Bowie to bring it up to?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I can't recognise, I think the term was used, rumbles from Ullapool RDS. The RDS crews at Ullapool, as you can see, their availability is excellent.
Yeah,
and they will respond to wherever the emergency is. But with regards to Achill to Bowie, yes, at the moment we do have 5 members of staff. Recruitment is always open-ended. We are always recruiting. I know we have your support in raising the profile in these communities, but recruitment is always open-ended, and it is a challenge, in especially areas like Achill to Bowie that are extreme rural, where we don't have the same catchment area. But it is open-ended, it's ongoing. Banners have recently been purchased for display in the communities. We are constantly advertising on social media, and the district managers are constantly promoting the RDS. With regards to the concerns you raised with Achill to Bowie, I'll reach out to the district manager and get a more comprehensive update where we are with Achill to Bowie. But although we've had that increase, I am anticipating that availability to improve by the next quarter.
Okay, that's good. Okay, because I mean, looking at the figures, it's Achill to Bowie and Kinloch, which are probably the very lowest, you know.
Yeah, but again, there is a lot of good news there, Chair. I mean, if you look at Albay, for example, 99% cover, Gaylord 93, Glenelg 91, Ullapool's first appliance is 100%. So you can really see the commitment from our RDS colleagues out there. Even Lochcarron, which I would consider remote, is 81%. But unfortunately, we do have 2, and if that are low, but just because of the remoteness of their location. But those communities are protected by the backup stations, the ones that I've just mentioned, that has a greater availability.
No, that's great. So just wondering, as I say, I noticed that there were wee green arrows going up the way, so at least work's been done in it.
Yes, and can I just say, I welcome your continued support in raising the profile of the RDS community, and the recruitment is always open-ended.
That's terrific.
I think there's another question coming in from Councillor Campbell.
Oh, yeah. Des, do you want to come in again?
It's just a quick one. In remote and rural areas where it's difficult getting recruitment, is it still the case that you can't go out with, you've got to have 4 firefighters before you can go out?
Yes, Councillor, Yes, Councillor, because of our safe systems of work, our standard operating procedures, 4 is the minimum that we can respond to, because as I'm sure you can appreciate, when we commit to BA, we have to have that safety measures, people measuring the air content going in and coming out. We've got to have that safety backup as well. We've got to have personnel manning the pumps, manning the command support, the radios and that. So 4 is our bare minimum for safe standards, safe operating procedures that we have to go out the door with.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, is there any more questions? No, we okay?
Councillors, just before I go, first again, thank you for your continued support, but can I also raise the profile of the employees, our main employees of the RDS, who also serve the community by releasing their staff to attend emergency incidents?
No, that's great. Thanks for all the work that you do. It's terrific.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Thanks,
Thank you very
Alex.
much for
That's
your
it
time.
coming.
Yeah,
No
thank you.
problem at all.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, members, the next one we've got on the list is item 4, which is the house and performance report. And we have Rory McLeod here. Rory.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, councillors. You've got before you the housing performance report for Q1 2020 to 2021. I won't read out the report in full, but I will pick out a couple of notable points. In table 1, you'll see that emergency repairs is showing an anomalous figure due to an administrative error. We do have processes in place to catch that, and that will be corrected for the next report. If you exclude the anomalous figure, the performance for emergency repairs in Wester Ross, Strathpeffer and Lochalsh is 5.8 hours, which is much closer to the Highland average and is within our target. Non-emergency repairs are taking longer as we work through backlogs that are a result of COVID related delays. Some of those delays are related to supply of materials, some of them related to lockdown issues, and also staffing issues with staff self-isolating, but also we were focused on emergency repairs throughout the lockdown period with a view to prioritising, keeping an eye on the backlog of non-emergency repairs and prioritising them as they became an issue. That will be ongoing, I think, over the next quarters as we catch up with the backlog. But the repair staff are working very hard on bringing that down. The rent arrears, you'll notice, has trended downwards generally over the last year, which I think is testament to the work that the housing management officers have been doing during the lockdown. They've been very creative in terms of getting in contact with their tenants and supporting them through the issues that have been caused by lockdown, with the numbers of people coming on to benefits for the first time, and the support that the housing management officers have been able to engage has been is seen in the trending down of the rent arrears. At that point, I'll open it up to any questions that members have.
Okay. Any questions, members? Nope. I think you're lucky this time, Rory.
I'll take that.
Well, I think, to be honest, I think we've had a few discussions in the meetings, ward meetings anyway with you, so it's basically just going through the whole report. I'm glad to see, like, say, the rent arrears seem to be coming back into normal levels, if you, for want of a better word, which is probably good regarding the council. But so, yeah, no problems at all. And yeah, I noticed the anomaly that was in regarding the, fixing the houses, with emergencies, etc. With that one, with I think it's 175 hours or something like that.
Yeah.
So that's great. Okay. Well, if there's no more questions for Rory, then we'll let him go. Okay.
Thank
Thanks,
you, Chair.
Rory.
Thank you, councillors.
Okay, the next item we have is item 5, which is visitor management. And I think we've got Colin Simpson here. Colin?
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, members. If you just give me a second, I will share my screen for the presentation. Okay, so hopefully everyone's seeing that okay now. What I was proposing to do this morning was just to take members through some of the progress that there's been with the visitor management plan, which was put in place this spring. Some of the elements of that plan are things which you might consider to be site specific. So where I can, I'll refer to things specifically within the Wester Ross, Strathpeffer and Lochalsh ward. One or two of the other things are being done at a kind of more Highland wide level, so I'll touch on some of them as well. And of course, happy to take any comments or questions on them as well. Okay, for some reason it's not letting me move forward. Just a moment. There we go. So the visitor management plan had a number of sections in it, and I've just given them almost as a contents list here. And what I was looking to do was just to give you a slide or two on each of them. And the two I've marked in green are ones which were specific area projects out with the Wester Ross area, so I wasn't proposing to touch on them. So the first of those areas of activity was largely around work on the roads network and some of the parking, but when we're looking at parking in this sense, it was more the roadside parking, laybys, that type of thing, rather than out-and-out car parks, which I'll come on to in a moment. And as I think members will probably be aware, one of the challenges that we'd had, particularly with the additional efforts going into things like roads maintenance, potholes, etc., was simply capacity within the roads team. So part of the funding went to appoint an additional member of staff in the roads team specifically to look after some of those visitor infrastructure improvements this summer. That person was appointed in May and has been working on these projects since. In your own ward, there's 3 particular local projects came up as the priorities for lay-by improvements. The contracts have been let for these, and hopefully members will be familiar with the locations, the viewpoint overlooking Gaylord or overlooking the bay. When I say Glentorridon here, the particular one in mind there is the lay-by towards the southern end of the Glen, which is predominantly used for hill walkers accessing Learach, because that one's quite often been over capacity and we've seen problems with parking on the road verges, etc. around there. And then also at Tornapress at the bottom of the Bialach na Ba. As I say, the contracts have been let for these, but there's a number of capacity issues I understand with some of the contractors' teams, so they haven't actually been able to start yet. And I don't have a specific date for them starting, but the work should be taking place fairly soon. Sadly, that isn't likely to have a major impact on things for the coming summer, but it will be in place in advance of future seasons. There's also some work being undertaken. Predominantly, this is further north than this ward, but I think we'll be extending into the Coigach area. There's replacement of some of the passing place signs on some of the single track roads, and we're also looking to roll out more of the allow overtaking signs. So that's the kind of roads element of it. I mentioned that with parking, that part only looked really at the lay-by type car park, but there was an additional fund set aside specifically for some of the larger car parks. And some of these were ones where we were looking to implement additional charging or to do some other repairs or improvements. So the key one within your own ward, which is going to be tackled, is Latheran Car Park in Ullapool. There's a certain amount of maintenance required there, structural repairs, and that will then be followed by improved signing and lining to try and better make use of the space that there is there. I can say from kind of first-hand experience, I stopped off there on the way back from the Hebrides a couple of weeks ago, and there were very few spaces available in it at the time. It's undoubtedly one of the car parks which is quite close to capacity at times during the season. I mentioned there a waste facility for motorhomes, which I'll come on to again later because there's a little section about motorhomes that I'll also touch on. And then the final point there about rolling out initially an invitation to pay. This is a kind of step in the direction of charging for some of the more popular visitor car parks, with that money then creating a kitty for the future to continue to make other improvements. Apologies, I wasn't able to include it on the slide. I just got this a bit more recently, but there are 3 other locations over and above Ullapool which are to be looked at there. The Upper Village Car Park in Lochalsh, the Greenyard Beach Car Park at Little Greenyard, and the Main Street Car Park in Lochcarron are the other 3, in addition to Latheran Car Park in Ullapool. So there will be further engagement specifically with members by the parking team to gauge your views on that one. And indeed, I believe he's going to be speaking to members more specifically on that later on this afternoon. The next subject.
Excuse me.
Yes.
A question on the first slide.
Yes.
The Gaylord viewpoint. Which one is that in Gaylord?
That was the description I got from the roads team, so forgive me if I'm not 100% certain on this, but I understood that to be the one where, as you come from, as I would describe it, the old bridge in end of Gaylord, you go up the little hill over the brow and then back down towards the Strath end of the village. I believe it's the viewpoint car park there, but I can confirm that with the roads team for you.
And I take it there's been no work done as yet?
No, with these ones, the situation was as you're probably aware, we have to contract that out to external contractors, and they've let the contract to Pat Monroe, but the company have so much other work on at the moment that they haven't been in a position to actually start it yet, but the contract has been let.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think Biz wants to come in now.
Okay, yes, that's fine.
I can just leave it till after Colin's finished his presentation and ask them.
Okay, no problem, Biz. Okay, Colin, if you just go ahead and go through your presentation, then we'll take questions.
Thank you. The next one, and probably one of the ones that's been most topical this year, was that we appointed a number of seasonal access rangers across the Highlands. The original plan had been for the council to appoint and fund 10 posts, but we also submitted an application to Nature Scott's Better Places Fund. They gave additional funding towards it, so there's actually been 17 posts created. Some of those posts, the additional 7, are all ones that have been created in conjunction with community groups in various places across the Highlands. And ultimately what that's meant for your own area, and from the point of view of the ranger service, they're looking at Wester Ross and Assynt together, because the same rangers tend to include the Coyock and Assynt places in the same patrols. So there's 4 of the 17 rangers are covering that area, and some of them are in partnership with other local groups, the Biosphere and with the Applecross Trust, who, as some of you will probably be aware, actually appointed a part-time ranger the previous year, which they found to be very successful. So this was to help continue with that service. The rangers mainly started on the 10th of May, a couple of them a little bit later. They started their patrols a week later, having had their induction and training in that first week. And it's probably worth saying that as part of that training, they did also get presentations from some of our partner agencies, so likes of Scottish Fire and Rescue Service and Police Scotland were in on the training, so they could be alerted to some of the wider issues and how to tackle them. It wasn't purely council-related issues. And generally speaking, the response from the public has been quite positive about it. I've put in here one tweet that we got just a few days after the service started, where a motorhome visitor was approached by one of the rangers, and I think this is probably indicative of the approach that they've been taking. It's been less about going in with a heavy-handed enforcement type approach and more going in trying to engage kind of on a more friendly, helpful basis with people and encourage good practice. And certainly in this case, that seems to have been quite well received. And there are other examples that we've come across as well, where people have been quite constructive in their comments about the Ranger service. Just looking at some of what they've done on the patrols, I think this is probably one of the key areas. The numbers in some cases are really quite significant. As you'll see here, they've done up 800 patrols, and this was based on the reports that were put forward last weekend, so that number will be even higher by now. Spoken to around 11,000 people and generally advising them about what's expected of them through the legislation and the access code. And that information is then submitted to Philip Waite, who leads the team in both weekly and monthly reports. He's done a little bit of analysis of that, but I think there'll be a lot more analysis that we can do at the end of the season to help us with planning for future seasons. But there's a few things that are clearly coming out in the early reports, and the 4 things I've mentioned in bold here are the ones which are probably seen as the main issues, if that's the right word to use. And again, some quite significant numbers in here. These are figures for the Highlands as a whole that I've got on this slide. So over 5,500 tents have been noted out with campsites, over 2,200 fires, and some of them really ones which the Rangers considered would have caused a significant risk. And I think this is maybe one where, if I went off a slight tangent for a moment, I also sit on a Highlands and Islands visitor management group, along with the likes of Scottish Fire and Rescue and Police Scotland and others. And Scottish Fire and Rescue were saying that despite the good weather and the high numbers of visitors here, the number of wildfires is possibly slightly less than they were anticipating. And hopefully some of that is because these 71 were put out at an early stage and lots of people were advised about what is good practice, what's safe to do, what's not. So hopefully that's having a knock-on effect in terms of fewer call-outs for other emergency services. Just moving on, outdoor toiletings, again, something which we hear a lot of reports about from communities, and there's undoubtedly a lot of sites where that's been noted. Similarly, a certain number of issues with litter and in some cases overflowing bins. I was just going to finish off this slide with a bit around parking, and I didn't put that in as necessarily an issue because whilst it can be an issue in some areas, what the Rangers have done here is simply note the numbers. So this doesn't mean that 12,000 motorhomes were observed parked in the wrong places or parked inappropriately. Many of them were appropriately parked. What they were trying to do was just quantify some of the numbers that there are around these areas, and you will see there's some pretty significant numbers there. And what they have done, because as access rangers, they don't have some of the enforcement powers in terms of parking that likes of Police Scotland have or our own parking wardens have. They have put what they refer to as warning notices on some of the vehicles, advising people that they were observed parking in a way that they shouldn't, and it was maybe causing some form of obstruction. So again, trying to use that opportunity to educate people, even where they don't have the powers to enforce things. Just taking some of these figures forward to a more local context, I thought you might be interested to see some of the numbers for your own area. And again, with the proviso that this does extend a little bit north into the Assynt area as well. What struck me from these figures is that, roughly speaking, a quarter of many things from the Highland total are happening in that Wester Ross and Assynt area. Roughly a quarter of the patrols, a little under a quarter of the number of people spoken to, but certain things, the numbers are much higher or lower. Interesting here that there's a greater proportion of motorhomes being identified in this area than Highland as a whole. But the poor behaviour in terms of motorhome waste being left behind, there's been a lesser incidence of that being identified. Similarly, fewer tents, but higher incidences of toileting, which is probably largely from those camping, because many of the motorhomes will have their own self-contained facilities, although I appreciate not all of them. I think some of this will probably come down to differences between areas, but more than likely some of it is also down to just a different approach from the different rangers themselves. they will each have their own strengths, they'll each have their own way of going about things. So some of them may be more inclined to spot certain things than others, and the neighbouring area, another ranger might be more inclined to spot something else. So I think only when we get to the end of the season and we start to do a bit more of the kind of number crunching on this will we tend to see any really clear patterns. But what I think is probably the real takeaway for me from this is that in years gone by, we've had lots of anecdotal evidence that there's been this happening, that happening, or the next thing happening. Now we're actually starting to be able to quantify it both at a Highland level and at a more local level. So it gives us far more intelligence in terms of some of our future planning than we've ever had before. Moving on to the last couple of things that are in the plan, some improvements to some of the public conveniences around the Highlands was one of the other areas. There's a relatively limited amount of this in your own ward, and part of that was because with the range of comfort schemes provision across the ward, whilst I appreciate maybe not necessarily as much as everyone would like to see, was already relatively high. There were quite a lot of comfort schemes within the ward. There have been a couple of other changes made or in progress, though, one of them being improvements at Ullapool, which are amongst the most heavily used public conveniences in the area, and also installing a counter at Dorney just to better gauge the numbers using it there. The team are keen to make further changes, and as you'll see, the budget for this particular element of the visitor management plan was relatively small at 60,000, so they have been submitting applications for some further activity. Some of those that have gone in so far have not been successful, but they're still looking to submit further applications to try and get more public toilet improvements for the future. Other forms of waste services. One of the key issues I think that we saw last year was that there were far more people looking to use some of the roadside bins. This probably relates to larger numbers of people wild camping in tents, larger numbers of motorhomes, some of the campsites remaining closed, so people unable to dispose of their litter on a site in quite the same way as some of the other users would. So the approach to trying to tackle that was to do a number of different things. Put larger capacity bins in a number of places where we could. That works quite well on some of the routes that have multiple collections per week, but there are other areas where the bin lorry itself is only out there on a very limited number of days, sometimes only once a week. So in these circumstances, it was better to actually swap over bins. So they had a local team who are in a position to swap over some of the bins during the week. And one of the reasons for doing that is also that simply putting in a larger bin is not necessarily always the best approach. I know the waste team have said that sometimes as soon as they put a bigger bin in, it becomes a bit of a de facto recycling waste centre for some of the local people. So instead of going to the normal centre, they think there's a big enough bin there, I'll just go and I'll put my rubbish in there, and it can fill up just as quickly. So you haven't really solved the underlying problem of providing more capacity for the visitors. So in some cases, smaller bins, but swapping them over can work better than larger bins. And to look after all of that service, they recruited 8 new seasonal staff across the Highlands. They do some of the fly tipping enforcement, or rather enforcement, they do some of the tidying up afterwards, they do litter picks, and 2 out of those 8 are based in the Wester Ross area, one towards the north end in Ullapool and one towards the south end in Lochcarron. And just as a final point, to try and make the Highlands look as welcoming as we could after the lockdown, they did actually send the teams out to do 2 weekends of litter picks at the end of April, start of May, specifically to get the place looking its best before people arrived. And I think that was quite successful. Moving on to motorhomes that I touched on before, this is again one of the areas where we've seen quite a growth in numbers of people visiting, and there's a number of different things that we've picked up on to try and cater for that. The first of those was to try and see where that could create some business opportunities, particularly for some of the small-scale landowners, crofters, etc. So along with the planning team, the licensing team, some of our colleagues at likes of Scottish Water and SEPA, we put together a kind of simplified guide as to how you could go about opening a stopover site for short stays. So this is not to create new campsites. They would still have to go through the usual planning and licensing process, but there's the opportunity to create some small stopovers. And I know from one of the people I've spoken to in the site I've passed myself, there's one between Lochtertyre and Balmacara, for example, which I believe has been quite successful already. That guidance note's been issued to between 40 and 50 businesses across Highland. What we don't yet know is how many of them are necessarily proceeding with opening a site, but we certainly know a number have. And because of the COVID restrictions that are in place, there is an opportunity for our planners to relax some of the planning conditions for this season to help tackle issues in the short term. And they have done so with some of these sites. They've let things go ahead without planning permission at the moment, but on the proviso that it's done on a temporary basis. Many of the people either stopping at some of these sites or those that stop informally in laybys, etc., obviously need somewhere to dispose of their waste. Some of them will do so by going to commercial campsites every few days. Some are either unable or unwilling to do this. So in order to try and increase the range of opportunities for them to dispose of that waste, we've run a small-scale grant scheme for commercial sites where they were given a one-off payment at the start of the season of £500, and in return, not only did they agree to offer that service, but they agreed to have that promoted. And that gives us, between them and some of the standalone provisions, such as the new unit at Gaylord Harbour, that's now giving around 30 sites across Highland. So I think that's quite a step forward from where we were a year ago, where there might have been a handful of places and nothing more. I think this is something that probably needs further work as we move towards future seasons, because this is a market that's undoubtedly growing. And even once we're past all the pandemic-related restrictions, I think we expect there will still be people coming here looking for these facilities. So we need to get some more of them in place. And equally importantly, we need to get the details of where they are publicised a bit better. In terms of these new facilities, there is a contract now being let by our project and design unit to get a final design in place for the facility at Latheron Car Park in Ullapool, and along with the resurfacing work and so on that's proposed there, they would look to install that at the same time. I mentioned promoting the units that there are. One of the things that we've been trying to do is to get that message out to as many people as possible. So we've worked with CAMPA, which is the Association of the Motorhome Hire Companies in Scotland, to get details promoted through their website, in particular through this kind of mapping system that they have on it. We also direct people to that location for information from many of the council's own activities. And as you'll see there, virtually all of the provision in Scotland is now actually in the Highland area. There's something like 75 to 80% of the places being promoted for waste disposal are actually in our area. I think we're definitely not where we would like to be. We're a bit ahead of the game in terms of what's happened in other areas of Scotland. And we do know there are other areas like Argyll, Aberdeenshire, Perth and Ross, where they're seeing some of the same issues. So I think there is a need to roll this out a bit further. I mentioned including things in our own publicity. We produced an Enjoy the Highlands in Your Motorhome or Camper Van flyer, which the Rangers are handing out. That seems to have been quite well received. But I think it's only fair to say that Wester Ross was actually a bit ahead of the game on this one, and with a lot of support from the biosphere, they already produced an equivalent leaflet for that area. So most of the time, the Rangers will be using the Wester Ross version of the leaflet because it gives some more specific local information that's useful to visitors in that area. But much of the guidance that people will pick up from our Highland-wide one when they're in Lochaber, in Skye, in Inverness area or whatever before they move on elsewhere, I think will also help in terms of limiting the negative impacts elsewhere. we know many of these people tour around multiple areas of Highland, so getting information to them in one area also has a spin-off benefit when they reach the next area, because they're better advised as to what they can do and what they should do. And then the last thing I wanted just to touch on was we can't do everything ourselves within the council. We are in all of these activities that I've mentioned and in a number of other areas, also engaging with other partners. Some of that's done through what's called the Visitor Management Operational Groups, where there's a North and a South group, and a number of council services are represented on these groups. I'm not involved personally in that one, but I know the likes of Phil Waite is and feeds in a lot of things, both to and from the Ranger Service. Dot, I believe you also sit on the South group, and there's an equivalent group for the North. The divisions that are used are such that the Wester Ross ward is, in a sense, split a little bit between the two groups. There's a National Visitor Management Strategy group, and that is attended by Philip Waite as well. And probably what's of particular relevance there is because it's such a kind of high profile thing, he actually submits specific reports about the North Coast 500 to that group. He also does so for other parts of the Highland area, like Arrears area, where there are some similar challenges. And then finally, through one of the more strategic groups, the Highlands and Highlands one, which I've attended, and as to a few others from across the council, we've worked quite closely with the other key public agencies, Nature Scot, Scottish Fire and Rescue, Police Scotland, and they've each done their own bits of activity around trying to provide advice to visitors. Some of that's around things like road safety, which the police lead on, but also things like you'll see there on the one Scottish Fire and Rescue put forward, water safety, which particularly with some of the good weather we've had this summer, has certainly been an area where good advice has proved to be really important. So we are engaging with our other partners. They're doing their fair share of trying to get information out, and we are coordinating our activities. And probably just a final point on that, the Rangers are very much our kind of front line in terms of engaging with visitors, and the Rangers do engage a lot with those other agencies as well, and indeed with communities. I know they've been around a number of community groups, I think 10 in the Wester Ross area, for example. So there's a lot of engagement with others and making sure we're all getting out consistent messages and trying to tackle things jointly rather than each doing things within our silos. So that's it from me. So apologies if that was a wee bit of a kind of canter through quite a few topics, but hopefully gives a bit of an update both Highland-wide and more specifically for Wester Ross as to some of what's been going on. And happy, of course, to take any questions members might have.
Okay, thanks, Colin. No, that was great. Getting through everything. So we'll start the questions. We've got Biz. You want to come in?
Well, the Ranger Service has been a great success story for Highland Council. It's a fantastic service. It's helped me no end with problems in Glenelg Beach at Strom Viewpoint, where they were using it as a toilet. They've come in and they've sorted things out. And I'm quite sure the low percentage of fires have been attributed to their help. I was going to ask about the signs. I've been waiting, it's now mid-August, for a sign for Shield Bridge telling traffic not to go down to Letterfair and turn left, just go straight on, that the castle isn't at Letterfair. So I wondered who's in charge of signs and where is my sign, and have they started it yet? What you spoke about a counter in Dorney. What's a counter going to do? Is that count the people going in? Is it charging? I don't know.
Oh, okay.
And I must say that at Achtertire, the motorhome place there and the waste disposals are a great success story. But I've had phone calls. People just don't want to pay. They went down to the Balmacara shop and the lay-by opposite that, there's a strong serve, was full, with the other side just not only that site, but Balmacara Rerig's site and the Astorchild one, not full, and then parking there. And the local community council went down and picked bags of rubbish from there. So I was wondering, I was at a meeting when Shane Manning was there, saying that Highland Council were going to introduce restrictions into overnight parking for motorhomes in cemetery car parks, but it's never been imposed yet. I wondered what was happening there. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Chairman, do you want me just to pick up on all these ones just now, or do you want to take other questions first?
No, if you pick up just now, that'd be great.
Okay, thank you. So first of all, the Ranger Service, thanks for the comments there, and I'll relay that back to the team. I think it's important that we make sure they know that their help is welcome. In terms of the signs, I can certainly pick up with the roads team on to what's happened with that one. I'm afraid I don't know definitely myself what stage that one's at, but I'll take a note of that and I'll pick up with them after the meeting. The counter at Dorney, one of the issues with a lot of our public toilets is simply just gauging how much they're used, and that's then useful information in terms of knowing what degree of servicing it needs. So in this case, it's simply a people counter there. It's not actually charging the people for using them, simply to count the numbers. In terms of both the car parking, the car parks and the motorhome parking, this is an area that's in a way a bit of a challenge for us. And so we're looking to do a number of different things around that. One of them, in terms of cemetery car parks, there is the intention to try and restrict use of that so that people can't park there overnight. Sometimes that's not as straightforward as it might sound, because the same car park is also the car park for a beach or for some other facility. It's not uniquely a cemetery car park. But the circumstances that we're in as far as overnight parking is concerned is that traffic legislation allows people to park overnight or park to take a rest if they need to from their driving, and it doesn't differentiate between something like a long distance lorry driver and a motorhome owner. So we don't have the opportunity to prevent people parking somewhere just because we don't want a particular type of vehicle to do so. What we can do is we can enforce any traffic orders when they're in place. So for something that is a formal car park, or for a section of road where there's a traffic order of some variety in place, so a clearway order or an obligation to pay to use that car park, we can enforce these things. So what Shane's looking at is how we can use these bits of legislation to try and manage the numbers in the motorhomes. But at the moment, if somebody does want to stop overnight in a lay-by, they are entitled to park there and they are entitled to sleep in their vehicle. What they're not entitled to do is to put up their awning and take out their picnic tables and set up their barbecue and these sort of things. That becomes essentially camping rather than parking. So there are limits to what they need to do. But it is one of those areas where, not just within Highland, but as far as the underlying national roads legislation is concerned, it's a difficult one for us to work around. So as I say, Shane's looking at what some of the options might be there. And for the cemetery car parks, that is through putting a traffic order in place. And as I understand it from the last conversation I had with them, those orders either have been or are about to be published.
Thank you, Colin.
Thank you.
Okay, Alex.
Thanks, Ian, and thanks, Colin, very much for the presentation. It's really good, really informative. And I just want to mention the visitor management operational reports. I think at the kind of head of all of that as well. I found them to be really, really helpful and really useful when you go to community council meetings where, you know, there are always dissatisfied folks and still probably living, you know, with the previous year. And it's been helpful to be able to pass that information onto people and pacify them in some respects. I just wanted to ask just for my own information, I know we've discussed it before with Dodd, which came through one of the visitor management operational reports, was the situation in Tornapress, because that's just up the road from me here. Because there are, just immediately as you drive onto the Bialach Road, there's 4 potential lay-by positions there. So I just want to understand that what is meant by the Tornapress challenge in respect to the lay-by there. That was one question. I'll need to, like Biz, I'll need to ask again about the signs, but that's something that I'll need to do both from the Applecross side of things and from Locharan. So I'll chase these up. I don't think anybody's been informed as to the signs, what has to be on them, what's needed. In respect to the Rangers, again, yeah, just all I can say is positive things, to be honest. Been a massive help over on this side, to the effect, I go to community council meetings now, and there's almost nothing to report in respect of waste, especially. There's always complaints about motorhomes still discharging their waste on occasions, but it's not as bad as it has been. And there's some toileting issues as well, but I think that is something that is for the next year probably, and just for the review of this year going forward. But for instance, yesterday I was at the climate change group, and then there was a climate phase the day before, both which are really, they're really interesting. And there was an incredible figure that was released from one of the 2 days, and that was Scotland's CO2 emissions contribution. And there was this figure of 50% that kind of was targeted towards the Highlands and Islands. And when we asked what the reason for that was, it was to do with the 6 massive heath fires that we experienced the previous year. It was quite a shocking figure when it's put in front of you like that. And we haven't had that. And we had one of these fires this year between Kisher and Locharan, which could have done a hell of a lot of damage to housing. It did enough damage as it was. But if it hadn't been, for the fire service and everything else that was put in place, the resource, I think homes could have been taken out there. And I definitely have no doubt that we haven't seen that this year, and that is absolutely down to the Rangers putting out these fires that have been started and caught really, really early, or even stopping them. When you see the kind of social media posts and the visitor management ops reports as well, there's no doubt about it. That's key, and that alone has to suggest that the Rangers have to stay in place going forward. When you look at the dry spell that we've just had, it's been the driest summer for 47 years in some areas, according to Scottish Water, and that speaks for itself. That we, touch wood, we haven't had so many major fire outbreaks. And the other one I just want to touch on was that I'm welcoming the waste facilities that are coming down the track, and yeah, probably we need a few more of them. So I just wanted to check, this is a standard, it will be a standardized waste facility that will be offered to any community that wants to install them, because I'm still aware that communities are looking at installing facilities, but maybe not aware of this particular facility that we're focused in on. But no, again, thanks very much. That was great.
Okay, thanks. Just maybe a couple of points to come back on there. Apologies, probably the same answer as I gave to Biz around the Tornapress lay-by. I'm afraid I don't know a lot of the details there, so that's one I'll need to pick up with the roads team, but I can do so after the meeting and get a bit more detail on what exactly is planned there. There were 2 or 3 of the other things that you touched on there, like the toileting issues, the fires and so on. And I think certainly the Ranger Service has been a useful local approach to trying to minimise some of the things there. But I think there's also something here about how we take that forward to a national level, because firstly, we're not the only area of Scotland that's experiencing some of these issues, but also I think there is a bit of debate at a national level around the outdoor access code. And whilst I'm not suggesting or expecting that there's likely to be any change to the underlying legislation around it, I think there is a bit of a willingness at a national level to look at the guidance that sits alongside that and see if that can maybe be brought a bit more up to date. I think one of the issues that we're seeing now is the cumulative effect of what a lot of people do, rather than individual people necessarily doing anything wrong. There are things around toileting where people probably are actually behaving responsibly, and that worked fine in the past when there were 1 or 2 people a week camped at such and such a location. When there's now 10 or 20 camping in the same place every night, the cumulative effect of that is such that there are greater issues. So there's probably an element of trying to raise these issues nationally and see if some of the wider guidance can be improved a little bit for future years. And basing a lot of that on firm evidence from what the Rangers have seen, I think it certainly aids the case if we do take that forward. And then lastly, just on the waste facility, the intention behind the Ullapool one was to try and do something that became a template that could be used in other locations. There will obviously be some local circumstances in certain locations that mean maybe things will need to be adapted, but the intention was to try and create some kind of template that meant it was a bit easier and a bit more cost effective to roll out other ones in other places in future.
Okay, Colin. Yeah, just a few things. I mean, the Rangers have been terrific in going to community councils. They're really supporting them. And I mean, compared to last year, there's been a big difference, you know, between the things that we've put in place, like the waste pickup, the Rangers, toilet facilities, etc. The only thing I'm getting worried about, I'm not saying yourself, Colin, but we can't just rest in the laurels. We've got to make sure that we keep fighting for this the infrastructure and more infrastructure, and make sure over this period, you know, through after September, October, right through to the season starts again, you know, the full season starts again, that we get more facilities put in. Like, say, we know we're looking at Strathpeffer, which is along different lines than just the council, for a car park and toilets, etc. But we've got to keep pushing this on and keep applying for money, etc. You know, I don't want people, some people are liable to just pat themselves on the back and say that was great and forget about it. This is an ongoing issue because our infrastructure hasn't been good. We've let it deteriorate over years, to be honest, especially in the toilet facilities. So I think that now we've started improving them and bringing them back up. We've really got to go for it and see if we can bring the Highlands into first-class facilities through the UK, and more people can holiday in the Highlands and holiday correctly without creating waste, without creating you know, problems, etc., especially camper vans. I mean, if we are a tourist destination, to be honest, we're going to have to live with them. So we need to keep going. But thanks, Colin, and thanks for everything you've done, because I know you've put a lot of work in it, and I know you've only got yourself and I think is it one other member of staff. It's been great, and we are moving forward. So I don't know if any of the other councillors want to say anything on that.
Sorry, Chairman, can I maybe just come in with an apology there?
Sure.
I actually had another slide that was going to pick up on some of the other things you mentioned, and I forgot to put that one up at the end. So I don't know if it would be helpful to show a couple of the other things that are proposed just for a few seconds. So I'll just share this again. And apologies once again for missing this. Looking ahead to some of the future infrastructure, we do need, our approach for the last couple of years has been very much to put in bids to the Rural Tourism Infrastructure Fund, and my colleague Leona has been really very heavily involved with that. In fact, her whole post revolves largely around submitting bids to that fund. So I thought it would be useful just to say that there's a fourth round underway at the moment. The deadline for expressions of interest was last week, although some people put in earlier expressions of interest and got some design funding through doing so. The final application deadline is the 10th of September, and we're expecting 4 projects in the area to go forward. One of them is for new toilets and motorhome facilities at Gaylord Beach. I believe Leona actually got the first draft of the final application on that one yesterday, so that one's very much on course. Some work led by the Harbour Authority around an Ullapool hub and further developments on the waterfront is likely to come forward. You touched on Strathpeffer car park there. That's another one we're working on with the local trust there, and possibly the Outdoor Access Trust Scotland. They're involved in that one to improve the size of the car park and put in toilets. And then another one that's a council-led bid is what we're seeing as a wee bit more of a strategic bid for improved parking on the North Coast 500. So our colleagues in the roads teams in Wester Ross and Sutherland identified a number of sites that they thought were ones that would be worth some further improvements, but where the cost of doing so was probably at a level that we couldn't pick them up with the small amounts that were available through the visitor management plan. So we've put in an expression of interest for improvements at 9 sites between Wester Ross and Sutherland. 6 of them are in the Wester Ross area, and it picks up on 1 or 2 that you're probably all quite familiar with, which are quite commonly used for overnight parking as well. The viewpoint overlooking Strathmore near to Corrishallach Gorge, the viewpoint overlooking Little Loch Broom above Badcall, for example. These are quite well used for overnight parking, so we're going to look into not just some improvements, but also whether there can be a degree more management of the site. And then looking into the slightly longer term, we're expecting that the Scottish Government will probably move away from the current format of the Rural Tourism Infrastructure Fund, which has been kind of quite reactive, and very often the applications have been influenced largely by which communities or local authorities or whatever have the capacity to submit a bid, rather than necessarily taking a strategic approach to saying what are actually the highest priorities to be addressed. So we put in a bid to them late spring this year for a bit of funding towards a post to pick up on the tourism infrastructure plan that I'd been working on prior to all the COVID changes. We were successful with that bid. We've been interviewing candidates this week, and I've made a provisional offer to somebody yesterday. So we hope that person will join us in September and will produce a much more robust tourism infrastructure plan than I had got to before. I had really not got much past the audit stage with the work I did. So this will develop that into a plan that shows what the longer term priorities are for Highland. And more importantly, Visit Scotland, who provided the additional funding to that through the RTIF scheme, were saying that they want local authorities like us to be submitting these by the very beginning of 2022. And they'll then take that to the national discussions with government about how tourism infrastructure is funded in the future. So essentially this plan will become part of essentially a funding bid for support to develop tourism infrastructure into the future. So apologies once again, I hadn't touched on that part before, but hopefully that picks up on some of the points you were raising there, Chairman.
Yeah, it is, thanks. That's really what we're looking for, to push on rather than just sitting back again. And hopefully another disaster doesn't come over the hill. But no, that's great. Thanks a lot, Colin. No final comments from MD? You okay? All right. Thank you, Colin, and thanks for a great discussion, getting through all the items, and you've been through it bit by bit. Exactly as what we're looking for. Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Thank you. Thank you, members.
Thank you. Right.
Okay, members, could you just give me 1 minute? The 2 dogs are at the door, but they're at the door wanting out. I want to eat, so give me a wee second, eh? Okay, back. Sorry about that. That's what happens when you're doing these things from home.
Derek and Alec have gone. No, that Alec's back.
Okay. Just wait for Derek. Yeah, the joys of working from home, eh? Okay, right, members, we're now at item 6, winter maintenance, and I believe we've got Ian Moncrief here to go through it. Ian?
Yes, good morning, councillors. Well, firstly, it's essentially, the routes are essentially exactly the same routes as in the previous years. And just to give you a quick recap, we operate across Ross and Cromarty, we operate 2 winter groups, the East and the West group. The West group, which services just about everything in West of Ross, Strathpeffer and Lochalsh, is controlled by Max Sutherland, Andrew Bone and Donald Grant. The routes are the same as in previous years. The difference this year is that they're launched from different depots. You probably know that we've set up Silverbridge depot, and that's now taken the route from Gorston Junction all the way down to Lochcarron, and we've also covers the Strathconnan route, which again is launched from Silverbridge. Some of our routes are cross-boundary. The Strathconnan route also covers Dingwall and Seaforth area, so that route also covers that element. The Dingwall to Conton route remains launched as it contains a fair bit in the Dingwall and Seaforth area. To set up the Greenhill depot, we had to take 2 men away. Sorry, to set up the Silverbridge depot, we had to take 2 men away from Greenhill, and that compromised what they could do in terms of delivering not only winter, but also in terms of what they can do to deliver revenue and capital works. So I think that's a significant step forward from where we were last year. When we get significant adverse weather, first of all, we would look to local contractors, given the distances involved. We would then look for help from outside, from the East Group, and finally outside Ross and Cromarty. In the last year, we had this heavy snowfall at the Fane and also at Guish, where we assisted Bear, and also during that event we made contact with a snowblower who principally worked for the wind farms. So he's agreed to help us in the coming year if we need a snowblower. That's in addition to our snowblower on the Unimog, which is sitting at Applecross and covers the Bialach. Essentially, when we get a situation like we had last year with 30 trapped motorists, it's all hands to the pumps across Bigger, police and ourselves to try to undertake any sort of rescue attempt. There isn't really much more in the winter report, which is different from previous routes. So I'd be pleased to take any questions.
Okay, any questions? No?
The route from
Sorry.
the route from Silverbridge to Lochcarron. Will this be the first winter that's been operated from Silverbridge?
No, it's been operated from there since before I came down, Councillor MacLeod. It's the only difference is that Silverbridge and the driver is now under Mac's control. Okay. Previously, it was under Laura's control, and she ran that as almost as a satellite depot from Greenhill. But following the previous discussions with yourselves, we
got Silverbridge up and running as a completely independent depot, improved the facilities, put in a mess facility, water and toilets. We put in a power supply, and it's now under Mac's control. And the man who was at Silverbridge, he stays there but works under Mac. And we also took a second operative from Greenhill to cover the Strathconnell route, and he's now based in Silverbridge as well.
Okay, so does that mean the Gaylord squads only go as far as Ashnasheen now on the 832?
They would come down. Yes, they would come down to Ashnasheen. They would also go round Uppingham, Mellon Charles Cove. They would go up to Camasnagal and Red Point.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Okay, no, it's good to see Silverbridge up and running fully again. And it's handy because it's in a, it's in a prime place really between, Ullapool, Lochcarron, etc. Even going to Strathconnell. So, no, it's great to see it. Great to see it up and running. So, any other questions for Ian regarding the winter maintenance?
I had a couple of questions, maybe, Ian.
Sure, Alex.
Thanks. Yeah, and thanks, Ian, for the report. Made easy reading. Just a couple of questions. I've probably discussed this before, but do we have any of these footpath tractors or footway tractors? Do we have any of these in over this side? I'm just thinking back last year when we had the really bad snow, and then with COVID help, there was a lot of work put into keeping pavements and footways clear to help the COVID situation. We didn't want people to end up in hospital, I guess, was the main driver. But that was greatly appreciated. It was everywhere you went, people talked about it, because I don't think it was something that maybe had happened for a number of years. And I just wanted to check that could still be achieved, I guess, if we had a similar winter again.
Yes, we do have some footpath tractors. One of the things is that we previously looked at was to get a wood bike, kit it out with a blade and a tow and a gritter box in the back, and then over the summer months that could also be used for weed killing, spraying. We haven't managed to achieve that yet. But if you leave that with me, Councillor McInnes, I shall give you a full update on where we are with the number of footpath tractors and what we're proposing.
Cool, thank you.
Okay.
There used to be.
Yeah, Derek.
I think there used to be a footpath tractor that was supposedly allocated between Ullapool, Gaylord, and Lochcarron. That was a pretty non-starter. We'd need to have footpath tractors, one in each of these locations on the West Coast.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I understand that, Councillor MacLeod, and I'll include that in my response. Okay.
Thank you.
Bez, do you want to come in?
You spoke about weed killer, Ian. Are we still using weed killer? Because every weekend I go out, when I go out for a walk, I go equipped with my shears and cut the brambles at the side of the road. Because that rotweed, knotweed is everywhere. I remember the days I used to go to the council in Inverness, and this is not the council, it's Transair. Going up Glenshiel, and there'd be men with bags.
Yeah.
Putting the knotweed in the bags. You never see that now. The knotweed's overtaken everywhere.
Yeah, we are still using weed killer, glycophosphate weed killer. It's still, first of all, it's still legal, and secondly, it's still within the council policy to use it on roadside verges and in footpaths. I understand that the legislation is changing, and I believe it might be, is it next year or 2023, that I believe that glyphosate will no longer be permitted. So we'll have to find a different solution to that. At present, there isn't a comparable solution which is as cheap or as efficient as glyphosate. So there's some of the various options include vinegar, maybe not the one you get from the fish and chip shop, but maybe a bit more stronger. But that works, but it doesn't work on everything. There's other chemicals that we can use, but they're about twice the expense of glyphosate and about half as efficient. And lastly, there's you can use either it's steam basically, and it's a trailer which goes around, you can tow behind a quad bike or a tractor, whatever it is, and it produces steam which you then use on to blast and kill the cells within the plants. That isn't really effective on things like dandelions. Now, I wouldn't take my word for it, because to be honest, every plant I've planted, I've killed in the garden. You know, I'm not green fingered, but I understand that from my colleagues in the communities that it works on plants that don't have sort of hollow stems, like dandelions have a sort of hollow stem, and it doesn't work on those. The other thing is that blasting steam into a footpath, like a tarred footpath, is not a particularly good idea. We think that that's going to very quickly damage the actual car. So there's a lot of issues, and there's not an awful lot of solutions, I'm afraid, at present. But yes, as we stand just now, we're still using glyphosate, and it is still legal and compliant with the council's policies.
Okay, Ian. Alex?
Yeah, thanks, Ian. I had another question for Ian, just because I was putting notes onto the papers now that we don't get papers delivered, so I'm on a bit of a learning curve with this. But it is in respect of just when you get to point 14, the community self-help, and it's something I know we discussed before, and Mark put something in place for the Eredale Centre as well, for us just to enhance that. But it's kind of taking it a bit wider, and there's other on the back of the Eredale's success story, because it's I'm going to call him young Kenny Check. He's not young, but he's a stalwart in the community. But he does all the gritting and salting around the Eredale Centre, and it's well appreciated. But there are other people who want to do similar or make similar contributions in the community, and certainly within 14.2, everything that's mentioned there is what would be required. The only thing that isn't there is these, I guess, these robust handheld gritting footpath machines, kind of manual gritters, and we kind of looked at them a few years before last year, and I just wondered if that's something we could put down on the list to have a look at them. There was a really good news story. I'm going back a couple of years ago. There's a young lad in Dingwall who got presented with one. I can't remember from where, because it was something that he was doing within his community, and I think it broke down, and then one of the local companies made a contribution and bought him, and he carry on gritting his village footpaths. That was just something else to throw in there, because I think if we had these handheld machines, there's quite a number of people that would actually go out and use them and clear paths to older people and just sort of vulnerable slopes within the local communities. Thanks.
Yes, just to come back to that. I mean, firstly, if anybody wants to take part, then if they can form a group and collect the names, elect a point of contact, and if they get in touch with MAC. We take people's names, we take the point of contact, they're covered by our insurance once they sign up, but we need to have the names, you know. And secondly is we can then offer them assistance. I have no problem including hand gritters. So I'll if we can get those contacts, then we can sort out what's required.
Okay, I'll do that, Ian. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Ian. I think that's all the questions on that. So are you taking the next item, Ian, which is the Area Capital Programme?
I am, yes.
Okay, if you want to just go straight on to that, that'd be great. Thanks.
Okay. First of all, I mean, it's a very fast-moving picture, and situations moved on since I wrote my committee report. So essentially, the committee report has to approve the ward discretionary schemes, approve the schemes that were funded from additional capital, and with Councillor's permission, I might go through the most up-to-date report with you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. So it's been a particularly successful year in West of Ross, Strathpeffer and Lochalsh. East of the Fane has been done. The footways at Gaylord, we've got a start date from Patman Rose. They're intending to start in October with surfacing to follow, but I should say that their order book is particularly full, and they've had to cancel a job, or defer a job, I should say, over in the east because one of their men came down with COVID. So I would say that it may happen before winter. If it doesn't happen before winter, then it will be done at the end of winter. But we're now coming towards the end of the season, and start dates are a wee bit, let's just say, they're not as robust as they could be. But Gaylord Footways, that's been awarded to Patman Rose, and it'll be done as soon as they can get round to it. Eredale, we changed from a surface dressing to an overlay. That's been completed. Oppenham has been completed with an overlay. Slatterdale completed. South Eredale Road, again completed. Underloch, we inlaid that and overlaid it. Kyle Main Street, sections 1 and 4 completed. Strathy Hills completed. Kyle Industrial Estate, again, Patman Rose started it, but they had to leave, and they'll come back when they can. I should say that trying to get any contractor now is incredibly difficult. I've even tried to get contractors from down in the Central Belt, and we're not having much luck at all. Balmacarra's completed. Rattigan to Letterferns completed. The section on the A890 at Ardenarth, we're going to undertake that in the September when the proposed rockworks go ahead. That's to minimise traffic disruption to the local residents and communities. There was a section at Strathcarron Hotel, a big section at from Strathcarron Hotel to Attadale, surface dressed. That was completed. Wee bit of overlay at Strathcarron Hotel, again completed. The 896 east of Lochcarron, that was done. Kishorn Hills done. Kinloch Junction was awarded to Pats, and a provisional start date of November. But again, I mean, if I was a betting man, I would say, let's say it will happen by the end of winter, rather than before it. I think there's just too much pressure. West of Torridon's done. Achnasheen Roundabout to the west has been done. Kinloch Hugh, well, it says here Kinloch Hugh to the bridge. It's now, I think it's rather than 1 kilometre, it went up to about 7 kilometres. So that's been done. Diabeg's been done. Golf Course Road in Strathcarron's been done. the square in Strathpeffer, it's been overlaid, this tree has been felled, and we've still got to remove the stump and reset some blocks. So whilst that's not entirely completed, the bulk of the works that, again, have been done. Arrears Court in Strathpeffer is completed. Balvrade Road, there's some public utilities doing some works there, so after they've finished in September, we'll see what's required with a view to perhaps overlaying that if we can. Strathconnan Road, we hope to get that before the end of winter starts, or sorry, before winter starts, but again, time's running out and there's still quite a bit of work required, so I can't guarantee that's going to happen before winter, but it certainly will happen after winter finishes. Letters to Logie Road in Ullapool, that was surface dressed. Rue Road, this is a new one that's now being completed. We only managed to do half the road because of the costs, so we'll be looking to do that next financial year to complete it. We've also been doing a bit of patching across the whole area. So that really sums up where we're at just now. And again, I'll be pleased to take any questions.
Yeah. Now, what I'd like to say is, you know, it's been terrific what your Rose team has done with Mark and the team, and I would just like to give them a big congratulations, because they're usually sorry they're usually the ones that get my apologies. Yeah, they're usually the ones that get moaned at. So yeah. Thank you very much, Ian. And if you can tell them that from myself.
I'll certainly
Sorry,
pass
I'll
that
take
on.
everybody else. Says you want to come in.
I want to congratulate Mark and his team also. I don't know when we have been so lucky in our ward. Haven't seen so much work done since years. So it's a great achievement to Mark. I was going, Glenelg is in for forestry funding.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So when does this forestry funding go in, and when do they decide if you get it? And another one I'm going to ask about those concrete blocks at our Narf. When are they going to be done? Because they were passed in your capital plan. Thank you.
Yes, first of all, I'll pass on the congratulations to Mac and his team. Glenelg, it's I don't believe that the STTS funding has been approved yet, Councillor Campbell. From memory, it's usually, I think it would usually be out by about now, I would have thought, because the deadline for the works to be completed is usually February. So can I chase that up for you and get someone to report back?
Yes, please. I would very much like that. It's Robin Pope that was dealing with it.
It is, yes, yeah. The concrete blocks at Arrears, we've been in touch with Highland, HFBC, Highland Fencing and Barrier. I can't remember what their second C stands for. There's only two companies in the Highland area that do safety fencing. They were the Simpson brothers, and it all used to be one company, and the brothers split up, and we've approached HFBC, which is Rob Simpson, and he's been out on site several times to have a look. He's done a push-pull test on the existing posts, and we're not going to be able to simply drive the posts into the ground. We're going to have to dig out and then concrete them. What complicates the matter is that it's Network Rail right next door, and whilst we're not on their land, we do have to keep them abreast. So if you can give me just a quick second, I'll give you an update exactly on where we are with that. If I can just
Thank you.
yeah, here we go. If it's just loading up in a second. This was yesterday. We had our technical team meeting, and the update, if I can find it, was here we go. Strathpeffer, here we go. It was yeah, we had intended to do it in September when the road closures were going on for the rockworks, but Simpsons, or HFBC I should say, are having supply chain problems in getting their parts for the safety fence delivered. It's temporary traffic lights aren't going to be suitable because of the width of the road, so we're looking at a possible nighttime working with a road closure. Now, following the community's concern at the last block face closure, we want to be working very closely with yourselves and the community to get the timing right for this. I think that what we could do is we could, if we speak to the haulage companies, we could do nighttime working, which would mean that it wouldn't impact on the local residents quite so much. The main haulage people are probably the Kishon ports, but if we speak to them in advance, then we can hopefully get something which is going to be suitable. I've said that rather than sort of like promoting a road closure and speaking to the community and the councillors and all the other people involved, we need to make sure that HFBC has all their parts that they need before that process starts. Because the last thing I want to do is to come along and tell yourselves and the community that, oh, it's going to happen on the 1st of October. And then we find that at the end of September, HFBC saying, well, we're still missing half our material. So when they get everything they need, right the way down to a concrete supplier who'll come along at night, when they get everything ready, then we'll start looking at road closures and speaking to yourselves and the community. I don't want to do it in reverse and then find that we have to go back to say, well, actually, it's not going to happen. I guess that's just the situation we find ourselves in, whether it's construction or any other sort of like supply chain issues. It's just taking far longer than anybody thought. But that's the update on that just now.
And just one more before I go, the Kyle, second stage of Kyle, it was good what they did this year, but it's the second phase next year, because there's lots of it still to do.
Yeah, I'm not up to date or up to speed on what their plans are, Councillor Campbell, but I can ask for an update to be sent to you.
That's fine. Thank you.
Okay, Derek, do you want to come in?
Yeah. What was the status of the South Eredale Road? I missed that one.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't quite catch it, Councillor MacLeod.
What is the status of the South Eredale Road?
Sorry, yes. I think that, let me see if I can find it. Maybe I missed it on my sheet.
No, it's on the sheet, but it says not started. Programme for week commencing 1st August.
I think that's been done. Everything's moving so fast that I might not have updated it on my spreadsheet. I can't see it here. I'm sorry. I'm pretty certain that's been done, Councillor MacLeod. Can I confirm that with you?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I know that Mac was up there looking at it, measuring it up, and that it was programmed, as you said. Yeah. So I'm assuming it's been done, but I'll get that confirmed.
Okay. I wanted to add my thanks to Mac and the team as well. The whole system has become much more reactive now. when we have requests, and it's great to see even that status sheet is reflective of the progress they've been making. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll certainly pass those comments on, and I would like to say, record my thanks as well to Mac and his team. It's perhaps due to the fact that the Mac is such a big area, and he's able to have about 50% of the road and about 50% of the workforce, so he's able to undertake both surface dressing and surfacing at the same time. But clearly, there's been a sea change in how we've managed Western Roads, and also it's Mac was telling me that even the foremen are see things differently now. They've become much more proactive, which is a really good move, and that's paid off in terms of motivating the men as well. So I'll certainly pass on your thanks to Mac and his team.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Ian. Alex, you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Ian. And I just want to add my thanks to everybody else as well, Ian. It's just been completely transformational, and again, you know, that cascades down from the local communities as well. You know, they see it, and they feel it, and it's really well appreciated. It has made a huge difference, you know, and it doesn't take much, you know, in some of the smaller communities just to, you know, add a bit of upgrading to the roads, and it really is transformational for some of the communities. Yeah, it'll be good to continue with to be able to continue with the program. And just the other one I forgot to mention earlier on or ask about, and I think probably Mark did confirm this before, but on the Arrears project, will that include repairing the collapsed verges as well? And there's 2 or 3 parts of the road there where the verges are completely collapsed. Thanks.
Yeah, I'll certainly pass on your thanks to Mac, and it's I appreciate how much the local communities are grateful for the works. It does make a big difference. As far as the Arrears project is concerned, I'll make sure that we include the collapsed verges. Okay.
Okay, thanks, Ian. Just to finish up, but sorry, Derek, you got a question, another question?
Yeah.
Please come in.
At 5.2, the budget allocation, it says the Ross and Cromarty budget has not been disaggregated to blah, blah, blah. But then it goes on to say that Wester Ross has a total of 48% of the roads, and the capital programme is based on 48%. So is that is effectively disaggregating, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the same system that I've used since I came down here about 5 years ago, councillors. Wherever you look, there's always, whatever area you're in, whatever ward you're in, there's always going to be roads needing attention. You know, so my view was that I split the capital budget up in terms of the road mileage, and on the basis that, I mean, all areas have damaged roads, so therefore it was as good as any measure. Now, clearly there's going to be some winners and there's going to be some losers depending on the length of roads. The budget isn't actually disaggregated. Some of my colleagues in other areas don't look at the worst roads in each ward or the worst roads in each area, but they simply look at the worst roads and put all the money there. Clearly, Ross and Cromarty is such a big area that you may find that if we took that approach, that one area would get a disproportionate split to the budget. So I try to split the budget up in terms of road length, and then look at that on a ward basis. And each of my draft programmes that go to committee is balanced to probably within about 3 or 4 grand in terms of capital spend, according to the budget split on road length. But this isn't a disaggregated budget, I should say. I mean, and I would support that any councillor who wanted to disaggregate that budget properly, because it's whilst you're getting 48%, that's my decision. And clearly, when it was a Ross and Cromarty committee, it was easy for, say, for yourself, Councillor MacLeod, to argue with a councillor in, say, Dingwall over which schemes gets funded in which areas. But clearly that's not going to happen now because they're all separate areas, yet there isn't a separate area budget for any of the 4 committees. So in that sense, I mean, I think that we're now in a position that each area should have a disaggregated budget, their own budget, that they can fully discuss and approve. Unfortunately, that isn't within my gift. That's something that would have to be done through the finance service. But as far as I can go, for the last 5 years I've been down here, I've taken it on road length. And until I get a better, until there's a better suggestion made, I'm going to continue with that, I think.
Yeah, that's fair enough. It is a fairer split to go by the road length.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
No, thanks, Ian, because that's what I was going to say. I mean, to be honest, even if it's one item alone that's really supported West of Ross, Strathpeffer and Lochalsh breaking away and having its own area committee, is the roads. Now, I've been councillor for over 9 years, and I'll be honest, we've never had that many roads done. We've never had 48% spent on us. I know we've had in the last few years, but we had no money then. So 48% of nothing's not much, but 48% of something is something. So for one item alone, it's really supported, this ward breaking away, as we've always said. I mean, I remember the years, no disrespect, Dingwall, Tane, etc. A lot of the road money was going to them. We weren't getting it, and that's how our roads are so bad. So it's great to see so many schemes getting done. It's great to see we've got a dedicated team, because as you know yourself, we're down to about 4 men, 5 men for an area the size, which is almost 5,000 kilometres squared. It was ridiculous. So for that alone, it's great that we have broke away. We have our own area committee. We've got lots of other things that support having their own area committee, like the coastal funds, 360,000. This kind of thing. It's been terrific. I know other areas are now moaning. That's their problem. And I know some of them have now broke away, as one would say. So because they've seen the success of West of Ross, Strathpeffer and Lochalsh. It's been a great advertisement for that, and I'm glad we've done it, and support from the other 3 councillors here, especially to do that. So great, Ian. So thanks very much for your comments, and thanks very much for your reports. And that's it. Thanks, Ian. Okay.
Okay. Thanks very much, Sam.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Bye.
Okay, members, we're now at item 8, which is the place-based investment funds. I believe you're speaking in that, Dot.
Yep, thank you very much, Chairman. Don't intend to speak much to it. There's no change since the report was written. Members are aware that there is a £100,000 allocation to each ward for the place-based investment fund, and this is funding to offset the 4 harms of COVID. The recommendation in the report is that there's a £40,000 investment in footpaths, and for the prioritisation of that to be agreed with the local access officers, and a £60,000 investment in community-led projects, looking at potential grants there to community groups, prioritising those which bring an element of match funding as well, and looking at 2 funding rounds for end of September and end of December. And just a reminder that the projects need to be committed in the current financial year, but the spend can be throughout next financial year as well. Thank you.
Okay, Dot, thanks for that. Yeah, that's basically what we agreed for the paper, so we're fine with that, no problem. So members, we approve that? Approved?
Approved.
Approved. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, thanks, Dot. That's that item. Now we go on to item 9, and it's a Gaylord Association School Group overview, and we have Dawn here. Dawn, if you want to just quickly go through your report, see where we are.
Yes, good morning, Chair, and I should say good afternoon, Chair, and good afternoon, members.
Yeah, say afternoon.
The Gaylord Associated School Group report is the normal template that we use to give an overview of the schools in the Gaylord ESG. Members will be very aware of the format. It starts off with some details, background to the ESG, including the projected roll numbers, and then it goes on further to look at details about previous HMI reports, and then moves forward on to looking at care inspectorate details, specific details about the school, including staffing, elements within the school. There are some details specifically regarding ASN needs in terms of level 3 and 4, and across the ESG there are 13 pupils in level 3 needs and 6 in level 4. And we can see the details regarding the ASN teacher allocation to the ESG and the PSA allocation across the ESG as well. There are further details regarding funding across the ESG in the schools, and also details outlined regarding the specific suitability and conditions of the buildings across the estate in the ESG. Further to that, in terms of the high school, we've got details of post-16 destinations, and we can see there that in both 2017-18 and 2019-20, that Gaylord High School had 100% positive destinations, which is excellent. It outlines the details of the destinations of the youngsters post-16, and we can see the details there that vary from year to year regarding the specifics. But we can see there that higher education, further education, training and employment are normally the main destinations of the young people from Gaylord High School, and these can fluctuate from year to year depending on the specific cohort it passes through. Further to that, there are details outlined that members can see regarding pupil attendance across the schools and exclusion, and this in relation to the Highland Council and the Scottish percentage averages across that. And then there are further details regarding looked after children, EL children and such. So it gives you a kind of quite a quick overview of the details, and members will be very much aware of the information previously. Also, at the very end on page 67, members can see the details of school rolls going into this school session, and there are, as we said at the very beginning of the report, there's a links to the estimated school rolls across all the ESG schools as well. So that's a very quick overview of the details, and I will hand it over to members for any questions.
Okay. Members, any questions? No?
Yeah, I think I have, Ian.
Alex,
sorry, I was trying to put my hand up there, and I'm still trying to work my computer. I made some highlights on the report again, so I'll just bear with me for a second.
Yeah, sure.
I'll jump in. Well,
Yeah, on your go, Derek, while I find my page.
Yeah, come on, Derek.
The building going on at the Gaylord Primary School, I take it that's for the nursery. Is there a completion date for that?
Yes, Councillor MacLeod, we're very pleased to say that The nursery was completed at the beginning of this week, and the completion certificates have been submitted, and the children are now attending the nursery. So we're very pleased with the progress, because obviously there's been challenges over the summer period in order to do so.
Okay.
It doesn't look complete, but maybe it is.
The nursery part's complete. There's some building works ongoing.
Yeah, what are these ongoing works?
I don't have the specific details. Would have to link with the states to get any further updates, Councillor MacLeod.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Alex?
Yeah, thank you, Ian. I've found my page, and thanks very much, Don, for the report. It's very detailed. And I'm just kind of scrolling down here, notes that I made, and on buildings, and obviously my head takes me to Shieldig Primary School and all the work that's going on there. It's obviously very busy. When I drove by the other day, and that's progressing, which is great. And the kids are down in the hall, etc. But you know, certainly within the buildings part of the report, you know, you've got suitability and condition factors there of poor and satisfactory, and it was just to get a kind of more of an insight as to where that was headed. I guess, you know, especially when you kind of see the words poor and satisfactory, but in which direction is that going to go in? I just had one on the destination of pupils. It's always good to see that detail. And I just wondered, when pupils are leaving to go into employment, is that local employment, or are they actually leaving the area, I guess, was my question. And then I think I had another one, if I can scroll down. Yeah, and it's probably one that we've discussed before, but in Gaylord Primary Nursery, and bearing in mind that you know, we had some interviews there recently, and so the Gaelic medium doesn't look to be any pupils going through the nursery, and the same with Prole-U, I noticed as well, although it's not Gaelic medium here, but there aren't any pupils going in there. I think that was me, John. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McInnes. Yes, the first part there regarding buildings, the Highland Council follow Scottish Government guidelines regarding the assessing the buildings, and that's how they're deemed to be assessed by the property services. And as we move forward in terms of repairs and renovations and such, things move forward on a kind of rolling programme, and when things are identified, there are obviously further building works and renovations and things done, but just now those are the current details that are on file. We've questioned this. We had a recent committee in one of the other areas, and the details on file are the details in line with the national standards. So these are the terminologies and the standards that are used for that, Councillor McInnes. In terms of Shieldig Primary School, I'm pleased to say that the building works for both the nursery and primary began at the very end of the summer term, and has been considerable work through the summer term. It is hoped that the building works for both the nursery and the primary will be completed by a date in November. So that's the provisional timescale for doing so. As Councillor McInnes said, we've been working closely with the local community, and we've got the children from the nursery decanted into the church hall. And prior to the children going into the church hall, the Highland Council have supported some additional project work and developments within the church hall in order to make it care inspectorate compliant, but also this will give the local community some additional amenities within within the church hall as well, which I think is very beneficial. So things are moving on with that. We know that there are particular challenges over the summer period, but the youngsters moved into the church hall at the beginning of the week, and the youngsters are back in the primary school, and there's ongoing works, but the provisional date is sometime in November. In terms of looking at Gaylord Primary School, the nursery provision in Gaelic medium can change just like in other nurseries, and as Councillor McKinnon said with Pillue, so from year to year sometimes there can be nurseries and sometimes there's not demand for a nursery, so that changes. We are under the impression that there will be reopening of the Gaelic medium nursery for one youngster come January. I think that was the information that we had previously. So we'll see how things move ahead regarding that. But it's good news as things move forward with obviously the building works of Gaylord Primary School and Nursery, and with Shieldig Primary School and Nursery as well.
Okay, thanks, Don. Bez, you want to come in?
Yeah, this is about Kyle. It's about Kyle Nursery. You're responsible for that, Don?
Yes, I can give you a quick update on Kyle if you want.
No, I can give you an update on my problems there.
Okay.
Well, as you know, School Road is a very narrow road. And it's great they're getting a new nursery, which will be ready in a few weeks. But I've had complaints from Weems Place, the residents at Weems, which I've told John Finlayson about. There's a mega next to the school. And there's been endless problems there with youngsters congregating there and drinking till all hours and noise. So the police have been called. So what's really needed there is the mega is a CCTV cameras or a sign saying no ball games after 9 o'clock at night for the noise. So. But I've also the problem with no fence put at the back of the new nursery, because behind the new nursery there's a steep embankment, and the cars are all parking coming in when they drop off the children, and people are taking shortcuts down Weems Place. So the Weems Place, that road is unadopted, and the residents there are paying for the maintenance of that road themselves. And when they come home, sometimes can't get in. So we really need a fence behind the nursery to block off that area. Thanks, Don.
Thanks, Ms. Councillor Campbell. And in terms of the details, if you could give me an email regarding the details, I will link with the officers in the States regarding the points that you've raised. And in terms of the schedule for the reopening of the Kyle Nursery, it is hoped that the nursery will be reopening on the 20th of September.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, just a quick question, Don. I'm just looking at the Kinlochhew Primary School and I see the roll capacity is about 16%, plus the suitability is poor and the condition of the school is poor. Which begins to worry me when we're down to the kind of figures, if you see what I mean. And we have the fabric of the building's poor. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but where do we go for here, or where does it reach the crux point with the school?
Just now, we've obviously got small numbers within the school, but Highland Council would support the continued opening of the school. Sometimes you get situations where the school roll diminishes to such an extent that parents decide to move their children to other schools, and we've had that previously in some of the other areas, including I think in the wider area of your own Wester Ross, but we've had that down in Lochaber, we had that in Roy Bridge a number of years ago, when the numbers went down to 1 or 2 and things changed and the parents decided to move their children altogether. So we'd have to review that very, very carefully, and we have to go through, if we were to go down that route would have to look at statutory consultation for closure, but there are no plans as such at present.
Okay. Thanks. Derek, you want to come back in?
Yeah, just something occurred to me. Where a school has been closed, and I'm thinking of Inverasdale Primary, and then subsequently pupils who qualified for school transport because of the distance from Inverasdale Primary as it was, can the pickup point subsequently be moved to a different location?
It would depend. Sorry,
which means that pupils who, in the days of Inverasdale Primary School being opened, they were within the designated distance from the school. But if they've established a different pickup point, or can they establish a different pickup point from the location of where the school was?
It would be very much dependent on obviously the location of the children and which school they're actually going to, but that would be determined by the transport.
Yeah,
Okay,
I know it's transport who decided, but within the legislation, I was just trying to find out what the position is.
They would get the transport locally to the new, well, obviously Inverasdale Primary School is no longer open and it's been closed, and the youngsters would be going and getting transport to the nearest school which they'd be attending.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, have we any other questions for Don? Is that it? Okay, thanks very much for coming along, Don, and thanks for the report. Okay.
Thank you much, Chair members.
Thank you, Don.
No problem. Thanks a lot. Okay, we're on to the last item, which is the minutes of the last meeting, which has been approved, so we've no problem with them. Okay.